Either way, I can't think of ways that.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Alexenburg, and I am your host for this special occasion for a special man in front of his special friends and his special family. And I can tell you that Don is with us today. He's right there. And that is a newfound way of cremation, but it's not under fire. It's done with water. It's called aquamation. It's 8 hours of massaging the body, and it's white sand. And I thank Darcy and Donnie and Linda for allowing us to have him here with us today. I also would like to tell you that I didn't know Don as long as many of you, 10 years. And we moved here to be here with our grandchildren, and I went to a home with Steve Resnik, who is here with us today, who has the ultimate museum of the music business. Blows the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame away. And I met Don Whittemore. And I said, I don't know who you are. I think we tried to hire you because I was at Columbia Records in those days, and he was with RCA. But RCA was out here and they really didn't want to put up with any of us from New York. And he could not have been nicer. And I said, what are you doing now? And he said, well, I just sold my ice cream company. Ice cream company? He says, yeah, I'm Dandy Don. I'm going, oh, okay. I've never heard of Dandy Don. And he taught me how to eat certain ice creams, as well as I hope you've been able to enjoy Harry's Berries today, because he would drive me out to Ventura on Thursdays and we would get Harry's Berries. And then he introduced my family and I to many, many restaurants. And today we were Zooming, fortunately, that Darcy set up from 3 to 4:30. And you're going to hear from a whole group of speakers, people. I'd like at the outset, though, to thank some people that made this day possible. This hotel is where we hold a lot of events, the Hollywood media professionals, and Babette Shade has done a phenomenal job in helping us put all this together, along with George and the entire staff. The bagels have been donated from Steve Houston, the owner of Western Bagels, without hesitation. I told him I was a little crazy. I said, we may have 150 people. So there's 150 bagels out there. So if you'd like to take some home, hey, by all means, okay? And there's about 9 different kinds of cream cheeses out there too. I never heard of some of them, but I'm sure they're gonna be good. Barry Shapiro, who is here with us. Barry is a dear friend. He had just met Don for about 2 or 3 years, and I asked him, I need some printing. We need some printing. He immediately volunteered, and he printed what you will see as a gift that we will give to all of you inside the CDs that we have, as a CD we put together with 19 of Don's favorite songs, or some of them. He had so many. And Ron Peskin, who is the owner of Brent's Delicatessen, the closest thing you can get to New York delis. You'll allow me to do that. He donated all of the pastries. So we have donations that coming from people, and he used to, Ron, come and sit with us every Tuesday in his deli in Northridge, where he got to know all of us, but he knew Don for 20 years prior because he used to buy ice cream from him. Molly and Rick Guillen, I think that's the correct pronunciation of their name, Harry's Berries, where Don would buy strawberries and get the real deal of strawberry ice cream. So Harry's Berries is here today. Steve Feldman, a newfound friend, helped us Promovid put the CD together. And Joe Barnes You see him walking around with a lens. He's an extraordinary photographer. That's him over here in the corner. So if you don't want to be photographed, too bad. You're already being photographed. So that's just some of the thank yous that I wanted to do right away. And then there's some people that could not be here that wanted to be here. I would like to read one of them that gives you kind of a idea of what Don did. For 60 years, a very dear friend of ours, we're the godparents to his children. Greg Lee can tell you the kind of promotion man, as can Steve Resnik, Joel Newman and the Newman family, Louis Newman, Joel Newman. He's visiting his granddaughter, one of his granddaughters up in Santa Clara. So he wrote this: I love my dandy Don Whittemore. Don was the most brilliant, witty human being I've ever met. His amazing sense of humor and passion for the music was second to none. But most important was his big heart. He was a mentor for many of us back in LA in the days 1972. If you needed advice, he was always there with a solution. I loved Don, and we're all going to miss him. But I know he's up there in heaven watching over all of us today and laughing and celebrating with the loved ones that have passed. I can hear them up there laughing at his witty humor. Love my brother Don. You're always in my prayers. That's Joel Newman. And that's the kind of relationship that we all had with Don. I only wish he would have accepted the job offer. I tried to hire him once. I knew he was hanging out with Elvis, but I was a little late on that one. So I would like to ask a dear friend of his who was very helpful in putting the CD together. He actually, I believe, was there introducing me to Don. Please welcome a dear friend, Gary Bombalecki.
Yeah.
Big Bear.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Gary Bombalecki. First of all, my heart goes out to Darcy and Don and the entire family, Linda, of course. And I was lucky enough to see Don, before he passed, and he was in the hospital. He was just as funny as he is in person. He's telling the nurses, "That's Gary the Bomber Bombalecki." I'm like, Don. Anyway, I met Don at Los Angeles Mission College. I was the president of the foundation there, and Don was on the board of directors because Chef Louie and Rudy knew Don because of Danny Don's homemade ice cream, and Don wanted to give back to the college because of the culinary arts program. And it's funny because I used to be a chef too, so Don and I hit it off about the culinary arts area. But then we started talking. He says, "I was in the music business." I said, "You were? What did you do?" And he says, "I was a record promoter." I said, "No way." And then I said, "But I'm in the radio business." Some of the promoter guys don't like the radio guys, but Don liked the radio guys. And so we started talking, and we had this bond together, and he became like one of my mentors. And he would call me up and give me these 3-minute phone calls telling me advice. "I'm not your dad, but," and I said, "Okay, Don." And so we got really close, and then I introduced them to Don, my friend Daryl and I, and he came on a radio show all the time. And one time I was invited to stand behind Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver at an event in Cal State Northridge, because they were having the Department of Volunteerism for the state of California with Marie Shriver. So I called Don. I said, "Hey, Don, you want to come with me to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver at Cal State Northridge? We have to stand behind him on the stage." And Don's like, "Nah, I don't want to do that. But let me give you a lesson, okay? When you meet people famous, don't say, 'I'm Gary Bombalecki.' Say, 'Do you know Dandy Don Whittemore?'" I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" And he said, "No, seriously. You have to always put yourself in the third position. You don't want to be direct. You want to say, 'Do you know?'" And I said, he said, trust me on this, okay? From now on, when you meet someone famous, say, do you know Dandy Don Whittemore? So that I'm on the stage and the whole event was over. I shook Arnold's hand. Oh, he says, by the way, when you see Maria, make sure you say, do you know Dandy Don Whittemore? I said, okay. So I shake Arnold's hand, and Maria, there's this long line and all these people waiting to meet her. And I shook her hand and I said, by the way, Dandy Don Whittemore says hello. And she goes, Dandy Don? You know Dandy Don? I said, yeah, I do know Dandy Don. She goes, oh my God. And she started going, he does the parties at her house with Dandy Don's ice cream Sundays, and he's the best, and my kids love him. So that was kind of a crack up. But because of Don, I got to meet Ron Alexenburg, a dear friend, part of my family now. But Don always gave me encouragement. He always tried to motivate me. Sometimes when you're in your own business, you have these days where you're down. But if you look on YouTube, I got a lot of interviews with Don. I interviewed him at the Dandy Don office and talked all about all the records on this table. He talked about every one of them. And so I'm just so happy that I had him in my life, and I'm really going to miss him. So thank you.
Another volunteer that has worked with us, that also is responsible for the audio equipment that he volunteers and brought it here today. He's the current president of the Hollywood Media Professionals. He's no longer flying around every day in his helicopter, reporting for Rick Dees on the radio. He's a dear friend of Don Whittemore's and all of ours. Please welcome Chuck Street.
My entire life, I have always appreciated colorful people. Don was a colorful person. He was a character for sure. And when he would walk into a room, people knew he was there because he had a presence. He had a presence. I saw that happen again and again. When he would come to our board of directors meetings or to our luncheons, our coffee with events. Don had charisma for sure. He was an excellent communicator, which I think is one of the most important things when you're promoting records. And of course, he was a people person. So you had to develop a relationship with the radio station program director, and a lot of times that wasn't easy to do, because they were being inundated all the time with the record promoters who had a new piece of music, and sometimes they were a piece of crap. But
Not I. Or you.
Anyway, Don was outspoken. I don't see how anybody could disagree with that. And Gary, as you were talking about, of course, as president of the Hollywood Media Professionals, this is my second time around. After one of those luncheons, Don would come up to me and he would say, "I'm not your dad." And then he would give me advice. So I admired his honesty. Most of his comments were unfiltered, which could be frightening, but always entertaining. That's for sure. He was entrepreneurial, of course, with Dandy Don's ice cream. So I don't know when he founded that company, but 1981. Okay, so you were still in what, second grade then? Four. Okay. Well, Darcy and Don, if I had my family that owned an ice cream company, I would be the most popular person on campus. That's for sure. So anyway, I only knew Don probably for the last 6 or 7 years because he did have a strong presence at our board of directors meetings. He always had some interesting things to say. He was always entertaining. I feel lucky to have known him. And so I just say, rest in peace, dear Don.
I have to grow about 10 inches between him and him. I mean, so the music business has been very good to a lot of us. And there's a young man that helped, as did Greg Lee and Steve Resnik, getting the word out. We're zooming out to a couple hundred people right now. I want to welcome to the podium here a young man that I've known pretty much most of my career, who has always been positive and very well respected, and has an Elvis story that I hope he tells you. Please welcome the Ramp co-owner, Steve Resnik.
Steve, yeah.
5 minutes, Dave.
We're cleaning up in post. Yeah, clean up.
Won't be more than half an hour. Hi, everybody.
No,
Well, am I close enough to the mic? Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Okay. I have to ask, how did Don Whittemore change my life? Before I got an actual job in the music business, I was in college radio at Cal State LA. It was the early 70s. RCA was doing college radio seminars once a month in their recording studio. 100 college radio DJs attended from as far away as Bakersfield to the north, Palm Springs to the east, San Diego to the south. Every session had a speaker such as Nilsson, John Denver, or Wolfman Jack. Before Don arrived on the scene, the RCA promo staff that preceded him picked me to help organize this event every month. So when Don arrived in LA, he was stuck with me as the session organizer. It was Don and Ray Anderson at the time. A side note, when Wolfman Jack spoke, Don introduced me to his manager, Don Kelly, who became one of my very best friends, who actually, together, we drove here together today. 50-some years ago, we were introduced by Mr. Whittemore. I think I can claim to be one of the first ever associates of Don in his LA history. As we got to be friends, he realized I was a serious record collector and a big fan of Elvis, obviously, an RCA artist. He called me one day and invited me to see Elvis at the International Hotel in Las Vegas when he first opened. He got me not 2, but 4 tickets to see Elvis on the 4th night of his appearances. I was beyond thrilled and honored. I was 19 years old. I was in college radio. He treated me like an important radio guy. I don't think he realized that my radio station went to parking lots A and B on windy days only. My best friend growing up was my cousin Shell. We lived in the early days of the new rock and roll music scene. I remember the night we were going to play baseball, as we did every summer night, but he said to me, "We're not going to play tonight. There's a guy on the Steve Allen show we have to watch." I said, "What's his name?" He said, "Elvis Presley." I was 9 years old. He said, I argued with him, "We're going to miss baseball to watch some guy named Elvis?" I never heard of him. We watched it, and it changed our lives. So I invited my sister, Debbie, and my cousin, who I mentioned, along with my girl I was dating, and we went off to Vegas for the show. Don told me to check in, where to check in, where to meet, and how to meet Elvis after the show for an after party. We got there plenty early. We went to the special guest line. I gave my name to the maitre d' at the door. He told us to wait over by the side. I went up to him and reminded him about 20 minutes later, "We're still waiting. Are we okay?" He snapped at me. "I told you to wait over there." Okay. After 15 more minutes or so, I asked him for a third time. He was not happy. He said, "Please go over there until I call you again." After we watched about 1,000 people enter the theater, I remembered that Don told me that if I had a problem to use a name, he gave me a name to use. So I went back to this maitre d' for a 4th time and said, "Is it time for us to be seated yet?" He said, "I'll let you know when. Wait over there." I said, "Well, I just want you to know I was invited by Tom Diskin." Now, many of you may not know his name, and I didn't know his name then, of course. And he said, "Oh my God," his face turned blue. He said, "Hold on one second." He called the girl that seats, one of the girls that seats all the people. whispered in her ear. She came over and said, "The four of you come with me." We walked down a few aisles, then we walked down a few levels, then we got really close to the stage. And she seated us to where we could touch Elvis. We were in the front dead center table, and there were 1,607 seats. No one had a better seat than we did. All thanks to Don. Priscilla was there, but she was about 20 rows back. We went to the special VIP backstage area after the show. We went into the casino and tried to hear my name on the speakers, but the hotel was brand new. They didn't work very well. We waited. Was that us? Was that us? Was that us? And finally, after about 20 minutes, I found a lady with the microphone behind the curtain and asked if she had called my name to go to the Elvis suite. She said, yes, 10 minutes ago. It's too late now. Now, I wouldn't accept that today, but then at 19 years old, I didn't know. And I figured, well, you know what? I'll meet Elvis one day soon. And 2 weeks later, I got a chance again, but I messed up and didn't meet him. So I never met Elvis, but maybe that was a good thing because when I was 8 or 9, I was watching American Bandstand one day after school, and my mom came into the living room and said, "Why are you not out playing with the kids? What are you watching television for?" And I said, "Mom, I want you to know that if I ever meet Elvis Presley and Dick Clark, I may as well just die and go to heaven. My life will be complete." So maybe it's a good thing I didn't meet him, because I did become good friends with Dick Clark. Soon after that, I got my first job in the music business, A&M Records. I was there for 6 months. I went to ABC Dunhill for 7 years after that. When I lost my job there in 1977, the first call I got was from Don. He assured me I'd be fine and would have a job soon. He had just left RCA and he opened up his own company in the CNN building. He told me he was setting up a desk for me and a phone, and I would use it and could use it until I got my new job, whenever that would be. That meant a lot to me for sure, and that was awfully kind of him. Now fast forward, some 25 years later, I was working at the Gavin magazine. I was visiting record labels in New York. My partner, Kevin Carter, and I were having lunch at Carnegie Deli. I said to Kevin, "You know that couple way up front, about 10 tables up? Looks very much like the Whittemores." I gave a note to the waiter, told him to go to the certain table. And he gave him a note, and the note said, "If your names are Don and Linda, I'm buying lunch today." Unfortunately, it was them, and I had to buy. We were 3,000 miles from our homes, and here we are in the same restaurant, in the same city at the same time. It was one of those things you would only see in a Seinfeld episode. We were there on business. He was there on vacation with Linda. Such a nice surprise to be sure. I just say, thank you, Don Whittemore. You changed my life. All the best.
Well done. You might try and envision what it was like to deal with radio people. If you didn't have the personality that Steve was talking about, that Greg Lee would talk about, that Don Kelly would talk about, we're all just sitting here reminiscing. And the respect that we had for Don Whittemore was just something that will last forever. I mean, I can't go by a restaurant without thinking of him. Because he would say, "Yeah, that guy, he didn't pay his bill on time." Don, where are we going now? "Well, we're gonna go out to, Simi Valley or Thousand Oaks and get some berries." Great. We get out there and the Harry's Berries took about 3 minutes to buy, but he literally talked to everybody there. And he would go up and down from the bread guy that used to be Jerry Moss's chef. It was just a dynamic personality that it's hard to even describe. But as Darcy and Donnie have put such around this room, you feel that he's here. And I told you, there he is. Please welcome a friend of his, Steve Peeples. I hope I said your last name right, because I introduced Ann Peeples in Memphis, and they said, no, it's not that way you say it. But you're a friend, and I thank you for being here. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to see you and to see the family and share a couple of personal memories about how Don Whittemore changed my life. Although I never got to see Elvis, that was unfortunately not part of the deal. But wanted to say thank you, Darcy and Donnie and Linda at home, for the opportunity to join the chorus today with a few personal memories about your husband and your dad. There's a longer version of these remarks with lots of incriminating photos on my website at stephenkpeeples.com. But I'm standing here now because Don Whittemore took me, a brand new, completely unknown wannabe music journalist, under his wing. And that was exactly 50 years ago next week. I was a freshly hatched radio editor and West Coast country editor at Cashbox Magazine at 6565 Sunset, just down the street from the RCA building. My folks were both newspaper journalists with a wide range of musical tastes, and I was a rocker from age 8. So I had the background for the job, but this was my first gig in the music industry, and I had zero connections. Don Whittemore at RCA was one of the first people my Cashbox editor and mentor, David Budge, suggested I call. By the time Don and I had connected, I'd already met Graylin Landon and Paula Batson at RCA Publicity, interviewed Waylon Jennings, and joined him and wife Jesse Coulter and some other RCA promo guys on Jimmy Rabbit's radio show on KMET on Wednesday, May 14th. Don called me the following Monday, May 19th. He said he'd heard good things from his colleagues about the Waylon and KMET encounters, and he invited me to lunch at Simply Blues on top of the CNN building, which we all knew and loved, which was conveniently just across the street from RCA. He looked dandy but hip, and I was neither. I confided that I was running on instinct and about 99% clueless about the biz. Well, that sparked the first of many, many meaningful conversations over the next several months about how radio and records worked. It was a crash course, I'll tell you. He was a quick-witted jokester with a wicked sense of humor, and I wasn't surprised when he told me he'd done stand-up in one of his previous lives. It meant a whole lot to me that Don took the time to tune me in fast, even if he did have an ulterior motive, to hustle me for more free press for his artists. It was a win for both of us. While walking across the street with Don back to RCA, he shared some personal advice that helped change the arc of my career. He says, you know, that Cashbox gig won't last long, right? High turnover. He says, so make all the contacts you can, ASAP, because you're going to need them. Well, that's exactly what I did. I networked every day as if it were my last, and that was probably a good thing, because sure enough, after 8 months, Cashbox management decided to lay me off. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. They just fired Ed Adlam, the ad director, the ad salesperson. So they were asking all of the editorial people to sell advertising, and I refused. So they said, see ya. And I was fine with that. So because I had this big fat Rolodex, I packed up my Rolodex stuffed with contacts, and I used Cashbox as a launch pad for a career that went from print to records, then from radio and TV to the web. My contacts led me from one gig to the next. The survival skills Don shared with me have served me for half a century, and I'm not done. And when I met, flashing back to 1975 again, when I met Don, he and Linda were happily engaged. They lived at 1308 Martel near Fountain, just a few minutes from RCA and Cashbox. And on work days, Don and I would occasionally meet at Martel for a quick lunch or to decompress. And I'd usually leave with loads of inside information that I could use for my next radio column.
And not just about artists from RCA. His network of insider spies was astonishing. Linda, meanwhile, was working at Radio and Records, and she also joined Don for lunch at Martel occasionally. And if I was there, she never gave me the stink eye or told me to beat it. So I guess I passed her audition. Linda, Don, and I had lots of interests and passions in common, and they were a fun hang. Now, they kindly invited me to their wedding at St. Mark's in Glendale on December 27th, 1975, and the reception nearby at Pike's. I felt honored to be among the guests. It was indeed the event of the season. And I still have the invite, and I put it up on the display at the back of the room. From Cashbox, my contacts and freelance work led me to media relations gigs at Capitol, and then Electra Asylum as editorial director. And I regret losing touch with Don and Linda in the crazy late 70s and early 80s as I got married and segued from records to writing and producing radio programs at Westwood One in 1983. It was a couple of years after that. I was at a birthday party in Agora Hills for a friend of mine in the movie business. And I spied Don Whittemore working out behind a Dandy Don's ice cream sundae bar, poolside in the backyard. Well, when I got to the front of the serving line, we recognized each other immediately. And as if on cue, he broke into a full-on W.C. Fields carnival barker spiel, touting the fabulosity of Dandy Don's homemade ice cream. It was like he was on stage and he took advantage of the opportunity. He was a riot. Dandy Don and his ice cream rocked the party. My friends couldn't believe I knew the guy. We had a chance to catch up later that evening. I thought it was terrific that he and Linda had reinvented themselves, necessity being the mother of invention. But there was life after the music business. Another torrent of years later, around 2011, after I'd moved from Westwood One to Rhino Entertainment, to Warner New Media, and then to the Signal newspaper, KHTS Radio, and finally, SCV TV near me in the Santa Clarita Valley, Don and I reconnected via Faceplant. By then, Dandy Don's Ice Cream was a thriving enterprise, and he invited me to tour their plant in Van Nuys, which I finally did on September 7th, 2012. Don gave me the nickel tour and was really proud of what he and Linda had built, but cheerfully credited her with actually running the business. He sent me home with a care package of assorted flavors for promotional and other considerations, of course. Don and I stayed in touch via Facebook, but it was also another full tilt decade before I saw him again. It was at the music industry reunion at the Canyon Club in Agora on May 13th, 2019. All our kids were grown by then. Don was in great spirits, but I could tell time was beginning to catch up with him. So I made it a point to thank him for his guidance and encouragement 2/3 of a lifetime ago back in 1975. He joked that he'd only wanted to save me from stepping on some career-ending landmine. Well, fortunately, thanks to him, I did avoid most of them. At the May 3rd, 2023 music industry reunion at the Sagebrush Cantina in Calabasas, Don looked very frail. We stood on the sidelines for some time, catching up mostly on our families, and I thanked him again for his mentorship. Well, in closing, with Darcy and Donnie here and Linda at home and all of us here remembering him as we do, if the old saying is true that one does not die until the last person who remembers them also passes away, I'd say Dandy Don Whittemore's legacy will last many lifetimes beyond our own. Rock in perpetuity across the universe, DW.
Well done. Thank you. I didn't know you had all that credentials. Cashbox, Record World, oh my God. Gone. Wish they were still here. So we have a gentleman that drove all the way up from San Diego who it's hard to describe him other than being a super talent, super radio man. He's on the radio constantly, SiriusXM. And he was the very first person after I got the call, unfortunately, from Linda, that Don had passed. And I picked up the phone and called him. And I said, we're going to do a celebration of his life. And you were a very important part of his life. So please welcome Shotgun Tom Kelly.
And we're on Zoom, buddy. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Look at that.
We got a lot of people looking at
Oh,
you.
man, a lot of people looking at me. Well, I'd forgotten about the freeways on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
My God, I think I left 3.5 hours ago. That wasn't enough time. But anyway, yeah, Don, this probably has already been said. And if it has been, I'm going to say it again. When you saw Don, if you've watched television in the 50s and early 60s, didn't you think of Vince Edwards? Has somebody said that?
No.
Oh, I'm the first. Oh my God. Yeah, I thought I was looking at Ben Casey, you know. But anyway, Don and I go back many, many years. I was working, I believe it was KCBQ. Might have been KGB, KCBQ. As you know, he went around for RCA. And that's when I first met him. And it was just wonderful. He was he had that wonderful Whittemore smile. Kind of like your daughter. I mean, whenever you saw Don, the first thing you saw was his smile. I mean, he just loved being wherever you were, and you were the most important part of the function. You know, it was always about you, not about him. And of course, he had some great stories. Remember, he told me a story on how he met Elvis. And he said, you know, Elvis was the most beautiful man I've ever seen. You know, and he was just amazing. He told me about that. And so many things that Don has done in his record career, and so many people that he's met. And I remember we used to, Steve Resnik and I and Don used to meet at Cantor's every Wednesday. I think, Randy, you were at Cantor's with us too. But we had a fun time there, you know, and to hear him tell the stories of the record business and later on the ice cream business, it was just marvelous. And we laughed. You know, I got to tell you something about Don. He got me into watching Sunday morning news programs. He loved Meet the Press. He loved George Stephanopoulos, you know. And now to this day, I watch Meet the Press every Sunday morning. And I think of Don. Don got me, because I hadn't been doing that before. But Don, as you know, was very, very aware of what was going on in the world. And it was great talking current events with Don. And I remember I was a big Tonight Show fan. And I worked at the NBC station down in San Diego doing some booth announcing and on-camera work, giving away stuff. So I always used to say, hey, I want to go see the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And I always just remember the production company tickets, you know, those were good seats. And I've seen the Tonight Show a total of probably 35 times. And I as a matter of fact, some of you know that I'm a real Tonight Show freak. But before I got into model railroading, I built a Tonight Show set in my garage. True story. And I went, you know, I'm kind of over the top sometimes. So I had a friend of mine who writes commercials, and he wrote, now I'm getting back to Don. Don't get me done. I don't want anybody to cast aspersions on my rap. Oh, God, he's not talking about Don. But I'll get back to it because the Tonight Show is connected with Don, and I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, I had a friend of mine who writes commercials, and he said, "Shotgun, I've got a full orchestra, and I'm writing some commercials for this hotel chain, a full band. And if you pay me $3,000, I will write your own Tonight Show theme, plus 13 bumps and an end theme." And I used that, instead of da 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 da, mine went da 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 da. It was great. And Don was the recipient of seeing some of my Tonight shows. I had a Tonight show that I got in trouble with. And I don't want to plug my book, but it's in my book. All I want to do is play the hits. I had the sheriff and the chief of police. The sheriff played the Johnny Carson character. The chief of police was the guest, and I played the Ed McMahon character. And so it was a cult favorite of both departments. I remember I showed Don this at Cantor's, and I said, Don, they raided my house, man. The police were, so it was a favorite of all the police departments and everybody. They had videos, VHS at that time. And so anyway, there were these murders in San Diego, and they thought the vice officers did it, and they thought the chief and the sheriff was protecting them. So that's why my house got raided. And I remember Don goes, "I can't believe that happened to you." I said, "It did. It really did." I got out of it. Of course, all the news cameras, I looked guilty as sin, My friends go, that close up that 60 Minutes gives you? I looked like I really killed somebody. But Don knew better. And now back to the Tonight Show with Don. I was at one of my appearances, in the audience at the Tonight Show with Don, and there he was. He had production company seats too. And I go, wow, how did you get these great seats? And I don't know who he was with. He was representing somebody, I remember. And so, I am the man of audacity. They were coming back from a break. The band was sounding great. Johnny was tapping on the desk with his pencil. And he turns to Doc and he says, "Doc, the band sounds great tonight. What's the name of that song?" And Doc Severinsen said, "Well, we really don't know the name of that song, but if anybody out there knows the name of that song, please tell us." Well, right there was my window of silence. I go, "You better believe it, baby." And two NBC patrons were coming in and to throw me out. I said, "Don, help me out." No, Don couldn't help me. So we were ready to get thrown out of here. And so Johnny said, "Hey, is it You Better Believe It, Baby?" And Doc looks up at the audience. "You better believe it, baby. You better believe it, baby." And Ed goes, "Yeah, I saw that guy. We don't want to get that guy's steam." So they let me stay. So Don, I didn't get embarrassed in front of my friend Don. But so many fun. Oh, you know what I'm going to wrap this up. I'm late and I'm long. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite things about Don, and I think all of us here will recognize that. When Don got out of the record business, he reinvented himself. How many of us could do that? I don't think I could. Don did. Dandy Don's ice cream. And that's what he was famous for. And boy, was that ice cream great. Anytime he had a tasting, remember every year in Santa Monica, he invited us to the Santa Monica taste test. You were there, right, Chuck?
Yes.
Yeah, it was great. And my voiceover agent, Tony Pepper, we loved Dandy Don, man. Everybody loved Dandy Don. And boy, did he have the greatest ice cream in the world. Him and Linda, you guys created a wonderful company. And we benefited from it. You're going to miss him. Excuse me, I'm sorry. If I end, I'd like to end with this. It's one of my favorites from the Bible, maybe one of yours too. It's from John 14, verses 1 and 3. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, you also believe in me. My Father's house has many rooms. And if it were not so, would I have told you that I would be going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go there to prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me and where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Shotgun Tom Kelly. Now it's time to hear from some family members. I'd like to call upon Ann Garcia. If you would please join us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Not known for my grace. Some of these acts were hard to follow. I'm Ann Garcia, Don's niece. Uncle Don was my mom's older brother. Until I was 7, Uncle Don was kind of a mythical figure. I knew Mom had a brother and that he worked for RCA Records as a record promoter. Whatever that is, I remember thinking then, I had no idea. Then in the Christmas of 1970, I was told Uncle Don was coming. I never thought of my parents as square, but when Uncle Don showed up, he was like someone from out of the movies. For starters, his address was in Hollywood. We lived in Orland. I don't know if you guys know that. It's a very tiny little town in Northern California. So I assumed that only movie stars lived in Hollywood. So here was Uncle Don from Hollywood. And then there was his appearance and his demeanor. His hair was down to his shoulders. He talked slowly and deliberately. He would say things like, yeah, that's cool, man. He walked around barefoot with jeans that flared out at the bottom and colorful t-shirts with 3/4 length sleeves that had the names of musicians on them. My dad wore Levi's 501 jeans. Nothing wrong with that, but totally different. With white short sleeve t-shirts, the kind that came in a pack of 3 wrapped in plastic. Uncle Don's clothes, you see the pictures, were from another world. And it wasn't just his casual attire. He was always an exceptional dresser. My grandma on my dad's side once told me she was in awe of him because he was one of the fanciest dressers she had ever seen. He wore a silk pocket square in his suit pocket, she told me. After that Christmas visit, the next time I remember seeing him was a few years later when my dad died in a freak water skiing accident. At some point during the week, Uncle Don took me on what must have been a very difficult walk. I was 10, of course, so he explained to me what an autopsy was. He gave me a description of what caused my father's death. In my 10-year-old confused mind, I asked if there was a chance my dad would come back. I can't imagine how hard it was for Uncle Don to look me in the eye and say, your dad is never coming back. In the weeks that followed my dad's passing, Uncle Don was suddenly around a lot. Mom liked to joke that Uncle Don decided he was going to be a father figure for the 3 of us. Bill was 7, Roy was 8, and I was 10. But then Uncle Don realized, as anyone who has kids eventually learns, parenting isn't as easy as it seems. But adventures with Uncle Don that summer were challenging as they were fun. We were scolded for having dirty fingernails and for burping at the table. Uncle Roy, or I'm sorry, I call him Uncle Roy to my kids. Roy, my brother, belched out hello in the middle of dinner. Uncle Don was not pleased. But the fun parts were we sat on his lap while he drove around town, letting us use the steering wheel. He swam and played with us in the pool. He got my brothers up on his shoulders like a totem pole and then walked them into the deep end until he swam away. I think he gave up playing dad when Roy threw a ball at Bill in anger and ended up shattering a window. As I got into my teens, I understood a little bit better what a record promoter did. I knew he was responsible for the success of several well-known musicians, but my impression was that he still met with DJs. I didn't know he actually knew the artists until I mentioned that we had been to a Kinks concert. My brothers and I were big fans of the Kinks. Tried to imagine my teenage head exploding when Uncle Don told me he picked up Ray and Dave Davies of the Kinks once from the airport. Of course, he said it in his slow and deliberate, "Yeah, I picked them up at the airport." Stars give away with a lot because most people are too awestruck to call them out, but not Uncle Don. Dave Davies got into the car wasted. In his drunken state, he reached his foot over and stomped his foot on the gas, lurching the car forward. Well, Uncle Don ripped into Dave Davies, and before they proceeded to their destination. I still can't believe that. It's like, you go, Uncle Don. There are a few stories that my mom and grandma aren't here to tell, but they're too funny and sweet not to be told. The first was when Uncle Don was around 5. Grandma took him to the barber for a haircut. He was fascinated with the way the barber splashed product onto his hands and rubbed it on Uncle Don's head while cutting his hair. The next day, Uncle Don decided to play barber with his sister, who was around 1 at the time. When Grandma walked in, she was horrified. There was Uncle Don with scissors in hand, the baby's head. Oh, excuse me. It's a spot because this is really cute. So there he was with scissors in hand, his baby sister in a chair in front of him, grinning from ear to ear. This was my mom. As it turned, and the Uncle Don's hands and the baby's head were covered in what appeared to be blood. As it turned out, Uncle Don was imitating the barber's use of product, which was the best thing he could find, which happened to be red fingernail polish. Another story Grandma told often was regarding her frustration raising a difficult teen as a single mom. One day, she thought she would really get to him, and she yelled to him that she was going to move to Egypt. She was hoping that he would be able to see how upset she was and apologize. Instead, my surly teenage uncle just looked at her and calmly said, "Why would you want to move there?" The last story involves a dinner out with Mom, her first baby, me, and a 26-year-old Uncle Don who didn't have his first child until he was almost 40, Darcy. Mom set me in my bassinet on the table where I did what all babies do whenever the need arises and began relieving myself, red face and grunting. Well, Mr. Hollywood was not having that. "Can't you stop this?" my uncle said to my mom. He was appalled that my mother couldn't stop her baby from pooping. He was so appalled that he got up and left the restaurant. I have a lot of special memories of Uncle Don, and his passing, the last of his immediate family, has left me sad in an indescribable way. It's the end of an era, and I will miss him.
Story about his clothing, and this is a Fashion Knob shirt that he made me buy.
Don's ice cream.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't have his ice cream in New York, but we should have.
Yeah.
Because you kept it out of there, buddy. You kept it for yourself. So please now welcome William Garcia, part of the family as well. Thank you. Family stories are the best.
Mine will be short.
Thanks for being there.
Oh, Thanks. It's all yours.
not much of a speaker, but I do have just a few things. So like Ann covered, he was like a father figure after my dad died. And she called it the totem pole. We were the rocket launchers. We'd go on the shoulders and get launched with Uncle Don into the deep end. We also, this was at our grandfather's house in Hopland. And we also played croquet there. And I was gonna touch the story that Ann touched on the ball, the croquet ball. Well, he was chasing me around with, we got bored with croquet and Roy was, I know you're watching. Roy was chasing me with croquet ball and I'm standing next to the window thinking, I'm safe. He's not gonna throw it here. Of course he did. I moved and went through the window. But his claim was I was trying to hit Bill, not the window. And the fingernails, yes, Don was every time you saw Don, he would ask to see my hands. Turn them over and look at them, make sure the fingernails were clean. Man, if they weren't clean, he'd send you in with a brush. Go clean those, come back and say hi. So I did get a chance to work at the creamery, the ice creamery in Tarzana. I did quite a few things there. I did make the ice cream. I worked at the cash register. I scooped ice cream. I opened the shop. I closed it. And one night I closed shop and he let me drive his Beamer to work, you know. And I would drive the Beamer to deliver ice cream to the restaurants. And I would drive the Cressida and I would babysit Darcy and Donnie. And but I came home one night, it was a long night and I had to close it down and I was short on the register and I trying to figure it all out and I was all stressed out and I finally get home and I pull up the driveway in Woodland Hills and their bedroom was right above the driveway. I parked the Beamer there in the driveway and I went up the stairs and went in the front door. And as I was opening the front door, I heard what I thought was trash cans rolling down the driveway. It wasn't, it was the Beamer rolling down the driveway. It rolled down the driveway. They had a rock wall along the side and then it turned at the bottom and out into the street. And all I could hear was Dandy Don yelling from, what the? What's that? What the hell's going on? I don't know. Trash cans? Where's my car? Yeah, didn't set the brake, didn't put it in gear. Down the driveway, across the street, ripped the bumper off, blew the tire. So I was wondering if because some of the neighbors were here. I guess the neighbor that lived there is not here. Would have been a funny story if he was here. Still a funny story. I worked all that summer there at the creamery and left what I had left to cover the deductible on the car insurance. And I left that in a note, wrapped up in a note under the pillow when I left. And and the last thing, most importantly, not most important, but very important. He married my wife and I, Cheryl. He was the officiant at our wedding. And I had a lot of respect for him. So to show respect, I wanted him to marry us, and he did. So that's all I have.
Another good friend who's arrived that we've been waiting to hear some words of wisdom about Dandy Don. Please welcome Dave Rubell.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Well, first of all, unlike so many of you, I'm not used to public speaking. I cook. I met Don early in the 90s, probably 91 or 92. I was executive chef at the largest catering company in Los Angeles called Ambrosia. Don came in, hocking his ice cream. We tried it. We thought it was pretty good. Don and I got to talking quite a bit. We found that we had a number of things in common. Of course, great food, special people. We developed a very, very special bond. During the day, I ran Ambrosia. I got lots of parties out. We fed lots and lots of very special people. Don and I would taste the ice cream. I had a couple of suggestions. Probably the first one, his chocolate was good. I thought it could have been a little bit better. I suggested perhaps using Callebaut Belgian chocolate, which immediately became part of the recipe. And ever since then, he became very good friends with Barry Callebaut, who ran Callebaut Belgian chocolate, which is one of the finest chocolates in the world. At the end of the day, I had a private chef job. I worked for Bruce Springsteen, and Don and I realized that we had not only just one thing in common, the love of great food, but the music industry. I also worked for Jimmy Iovine at the beginning of Interscope Records, and on and on. Don and I had one other thing in common that we shared very, very greatly. We love to go in my walk-in refrigerator and smoke a joint. Someone needed to. Don and my friendship lasted for many, many years. The next big suggestion I had for him for his ice cream, I thought maybe his strawberry ice cream needed a little bit of a tweak. I had some wonderful, wonderful farmer friends. And I had been hitting the farmer's market for my ingredients for many, many years. And I suggested perhaps incorporating Harry's berries into his ice cream. He said, "You're nuts. They are so expensive, I couldn't possibly do that." I introduced him to Rick and Molly Jean, who owned Harry's Berries. They all hit it off. They had a walk in, but they didn't bother going in there with him. Leave it at that. And they worked out a deal that Rick and Molly were very, very particular about their berries. They would only sell their berries at, say, the Wednesday market in Santa Monica or the Saturday market. On Thursday, they would never sell their berries again. They were day-old berries. Therefore, they weren't quite as good. They would give Don the berries. That's how he wound up incorporating them into his ice cream, which was Harry's Berries ice cream.
Good.
The best. Don and I remained friends for many, many years. I remember when he retired, sold the company. It was a very, very special time. We celebrated it dearly. Don and I remained very close friends, and after that, would very, very much look forward to our lunches together. We would go to lunch at one of my favorite places, which quickly became one of his favorite places. It was called the Real Inn. We would go there for lunch. We would have our shrimp and chips. We loved it. We would just go and sit for hours and talk about the food business, the music business, and how much we loved our lives and how lucky we were. I remember the last time Don and I had lunch there. It was absolutely wonderful. Of course, we spoke about Linda often, who I'm sorry is not here today, but I'm glad she's at home with us virtually. Anyway, I had the joy on January 6th of this year to have my last lunch at the Real Inn. It was a Monday. It was the day before the fires. The next day, the Real Inn burned to the ground.
Oh,
Yeah.
To finalize today, all I can say is, right now, hopefully today for lunch, Don had lunch at the Real Inn. And I'm hoping one of these days I get to meet him there and have lunch with him again. And I hope many of you are there with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the Harry's Berries.
yeah.
You know, it's interesting when you lose someone in your family. You'll allow me. I visited with Don many times knowing he wasn't really that healthy, but he would never complain about it. I would pick him up. We would drive. I hated that driveway at their house. He and Don Graham, God rest his soul, had two of the worst driveways in the world. Long Island, we never had those kind of crazy drives. But, you know, I got to know Donnie and Darcy, and I would have known them, hello, how you doing? But when you have family and you lose a member, and we had a big hit record one day called I'll Always Love My Mama. She's my favorite girl. You only get one, but you only get one father. And there he is, right in front of all of us. Please welcome his son, Donnie Whittemore.
Yeah.
I've never seen you dressed so well.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to Ron. Thank you to everybody that did anything to put this together. Just thank you so much. I've been thinking a lot about what I want to say about my dad. If everybody here told every single Don story, we would be here till June. All right. So that's not gonna happen. Some things that I've noticed a lot are the misconceptions that I've had about him. I knew he loved to schmooze. He loved mixers. I always assumed that was largely for the business side of it. Not that he didn't like to meet people, but that the purpose behind it was, I'm gonna get business, we're gonna work together, something like that. Since he's been retired, he's probably done those kind of things more than he used to. And it's because he loved the human connection. He loved to help people. He didn't want anything from them. He just wanted to know, like, this guy would go great with this guy or this girl, and let's get them together, and there it is. And I recognize that as something that I've seen myself do a lot. And I wish I would have known that more about him. I could have asked him, I'm sure, but you know, it's just one of those things. It's really, really nice to see. And so there's a ton of stories that I could tell, but I think the ones that really stuck with me, I don't know if you guys noticed back there, but on some of those tables with the pictures, there's an old VHS copy of Top Gun. And you might be wondering, what the hell is there VHS of Top Gun doing there? Well, when that movie first came out on a VHS, back in the day, coming home with that movie day one, that was not easy. And Dad came home with it, and me and Darcy flipped out. Oh my God, Dad's so great. I didn't really take note of it at the time, but then I want to say about 2 or 3 years ago, he found it. He was downstairs looking through stuff, and he brought it over to me just to say, "Hey, do you remember how excited you and Darcy got when I brought this home?" And sure I did, but I didn't realize how much that meant to him, for him to be super dad, because that's what he was. And the look on his face when he was telling me about that, for the music, for the ice cream, for all the different stuff, family was really number one to him. And it just meant so much to me to actually see that from him. Another story, way back in the day, I was probably 7 and I was playing soccer practice, and for God knows what reason, I decided to take my watch off and just put it on the ground. I don't know why I did it, but I did it. And I came home and I said, "Oh, I lost my watch." The next morning, Dad goes over there, Shadow Ranch Park, huge field, finds my watch somehow. From that moment on, super dad. My dad can do no wrong. There's nothing that he cannot do. That's it. Mark it down. Period. Seeing all these people here, hearing all the stories, hearing that not just a lot of people telling the same stories. Everybody has their own unique story, their own little pocket that only they knew about with him. That's very unique. I don't think most people touch that many lives like that. And it's just really astounding to see. It's humbling to see, and it just fills my heart with pride and love to know that my father impacted that many people. And I'm going to leave it with one more story about not just how he impacted people, but he really impacted music. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't know this. I don't know how many people he told this to, but he actually picked John Denver's single Rocky Mountain High because the label, they sent him out with a different song, and that song wasn't really doing very well. So the label calls him in, says, "Hey, how's this song doing?" He says, "Not really much, but the B-side, people are loving that." And they said, "Okay, cool. Let's push that one." And when he's telling me this story, we were in Iowa for Darcy and Frank's wedding, and maybe just being there outside, sitting on that porch, he felt open enough to kind of start talking about this. And I said, "Dad, you picked the single. That's a pretty big deal." And he says, No. I'm just reporting. I'm just giving him feedback, just giving him the market data." And I said, "No, Dad, you picked the single." And I went full Kevin Hart. I said, "Say it with your chest. Come on now. Like, you picked the single." And he wouldn't. And he's like, "Yeah, thank you." And I've seen my dad be very braggadocious. He loves to promote himself. And in that, for whatever reason, he had a hard time saying, like, "You're right, I did." And it was just really cool for me to see at that time that, yeah, he can be humble sometimes and really be like, "Oh, shucks, no." Because I wasn't used to seeing that. And yeah, that's one of those stories that really stuck with me, and I'm never going to forget it. There's so much that we could all say about him. He's obviously a great father, great provider, the best husband that my mom could ever ask for. But really, he loved just having a family, being a part of our lives, all of it. And I'm going to miss him every single day. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Please welcome Darcy Whittemore.
Yeah.
Put up, girl.
Thanks, babe. Ah. Oh, it's so weird.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's my honor to go last. And I figured that whatever I have to say is gonna be highly informed by what all of you shared and what so many other people have shared. Also, Donnie meant to read something that was so touching. It was a long piece by his friend Wade, if you're out there, Wade. They met on a cruise ship a couple of years ago, but Linda and Don never took cruises, but they did do this one cruise in 2019. And Wade and Don, instant soul connection. It was the fashion, it was the temperament, it was the just overarching thing. And once again, Don ended up with a great friend out of nowhere in the later stages of his life, which was amazing and just totally Don. And then I was going to read something by, if you know anything about Dandy Dons, you know Dandy Dons would not have been Dandy Dons without Elias Covarrubias. And Elias was incredible. And what he wrote was incredible. And if you're out there, Elias, I'm not going to read it now, but I think it just illustrates that Don understood something from an early age. And I don't know if it's because of all of his early experiences, but that life is very fragile and precious, and it is people that really bring value. And we know that things like music and ice cream and food and other things and love and the moments we spend together are at the end all we have. It's not money or status or weird things. It's the stories, it's the experiences. Bill, I love the story about the Beamer almost as much as like I remember being in it, and it was never about the status of the Beamer. It was about he just wasn't a status driven person. He was a people person, and he loved to hang, and he loved to let you know that he valued the time that he had with you, be it with my son, Marco, be it with Donnie and me, be it with Linda. You would not believe what I am having to sort through right now. All the love letters that he wrote to her. Yesterday. It was just take time with the people you love and reach out to them. He also was an incredible collector of precious items. We had no idea that he was so aware of how, it's so crazy now. We're looking at these kids, these beautiful kids, Dariush and Marco, and how their lives are going to be so different than our lives, right? Like the paper objects, the physical media. He kept so many things, and it's like you can just feel his presence around these things. He wasn't a hoarder at all. That's not what I'm saying. He was very selective about what he saved. The night that he died, I felt like I was finally ready to go through some of his stuff. He hadn't passed yet, but it had been a real emotional day at the hospital. And so who's been in the basement before? Not enough, man. I'm so sad. That was a very special place. And he sold, Ann and Bill, he sold the records pre-COVID. He was ready to go because there was water damage. He had like 8,000 records. It was crazy. Anyway, he has all of this stuff. It's so fun to go through. And I found a box I had never seen before. And in this box, I found his hot rodder jacket, which I didn't know he had. I had forgotten. And it's hanging, I think, out there. And then I also found these scrapbooks that he started making when he was 10. It was far out because it wasn't about his achievements. It was about I think he fell off his bike and injured himself, and maybe somebody had kept it and given him. And then it was just these scrapbooks that were full of just little moments of experience where he grew up. Some featured him and some didn't. It was just like he knew that life was going to go by too fast and he had to keep his finger on it. And it was, his whole thing was you have to make sure that you make these moments count. And yes, you can do that by saving things. He loved to save ticket stubs. He loved to save brochures, but also by making sure that you let people know in writing how you feel about them. The text messages I got now, crazy. They were like works of poetry, but I found letters that he had written to his mom, throughout their entire relationship. And it was just such an honest exchange of ideas. And I hate, for those of you who don't know, I teach 5th grade writing in Brooklyn, and it's a really interesting subject to teach in a moment like this because communication is changing so rapidly. And my kids don't want it to degrade. They want it to be like this full-hearted expression of ideas and an exchange. They want this so desperately, and they're so excited that I allow them to do this and like give them lots of time to write, knowing that the world outside, most people don't read that carefully anymore, and they don't listen when you're talking to them. Although in this room, it's very different. You guys are very good listeners. I know Don was really rare, but I also know he was of a time, and it's hard to let go of that time. I know he was rare today, and yes, he survived a lot of things that are crazy to think about. You guys know he had polio, he had spinal meningitis 3 or 4 times. He hitchhiked to Alaska when he was 16, but he only made it to Oregon. He told me a story where he was working in Alaska because his dad was doing something with creating like a dock. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna get the stories wrong, but he was working on a caisson and got stuck for like 8 hours and he almost died. He had so many stories, and that's just up to the age of 20, right? I mean, we know then everything else that happened. I just feel like saying goodbye to Don is like saying goodbye to the 20th century. And it's hard to do that. And I'm trying so hard to carry forward everything that he taught me about being a human being and being like a good person. Because nobody's perfect, but it's really important to wake up every day and just try to be the best you can and serve the people around you the best you can. Make as many connections as you can. And I'm really going to miss him, but I'm really grateful that he gave me all that, and I always had clean fingernails because he was so into that. I think that's all it is. I mean, you also know he was born in Colombia, right? It's crazy, man. He was born in Colombia. The ship they took during World War II to come. Now, you guys, they had to take a ship from Costa Rica because Nancy was born in Costa Rica, and they went to the Bay Area, but they took a ship and they had to separate the men from the women in case there was a bomb. Something like that, but you're nodding, so I'm kind of getting it right. So many freaking stories. It's crazy. But I just wanted to say, for some reason, since he died, if I hear the song, I Love LA by Randy Newman, I cannot stop crying. And he loved that song so much because it was like, he's the ice cream store owner in Tarzana, it's a valley guy. He really loved LA. And in the song, Randy Newman expresses how much he loves LA, and he loved the punchline of that is that right after he wrote that song, he left LA. It was very daunting to tell me, like you always have to dim the fantasy a little. But the line about we were born to ride, I just think that really gets him. That's what we're born to do. It's like love the things you love, do them as much as you can. Don't let too much bullshit happen, and if you get that kind of a groove, get yourself out of it as fast as possible. He was great. So that's all I'm going to say, but I have a special treat for you. We got the cherry on the top of the sundae. Somebody said that they wanted to say a few last things about their grandfather. So we got Marco Basilio. You like it.
Hello?
Hi, hello.
Loud. Hi, I mean, I haven't, well, I don't know that, I don't know many things about, Dandy Don Whittemore, like all of you probably do, but, I mean, I've known him all my life. But, I'm only 10, so. But what I do know is that he was a really important person to a lot of people. And I knew how much he meant to a lot of people, and that I just feel like all the stories that you've shared over this amount of time that we've had today have really meant something to a lot of people. And I just wanted to say, I love you, Grandpa.
And he loved you. So I want to thank you on behalf of everyone that's here, people that are watching us, a couple hundred people. In order for us to all continue to listen, this is something that we put together thanks to Gary Bombalecki and thanks to Barry Shapiro and thanks to a newfound friend that Steve Feldman that put this together. We have one for everybody here, a CD that Darcy helped finance and put together.
And Donnie.
And hey, don't interrupt me. That's something your father would do, okay? So let me back up. And Donnie, on this CD is 19 songs that Donnie helped edit and make sound terrific. So it says, like it says on this program, Dandy Don was truly one of a kind. His generosity of spirit left an indelible mark on all those who knew him. That was said here many times today. Although he will be missed, he will always be alive in our hearts. Enjoy the music he helped get to the world and let the good times roll. And I don't believe in goodbyes. What I believe in is to be continued. So it'll be continued. Thank you all for being here. And we have them for you. Thank you for watching. Got it.
Thank you.